into the eerie world of Paranormal M, where each story brings a new mystery to life. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay connected to our chilling adventures. The unexplained is just a click away. Ghost or bipolar. I've seen shadow people for as long as I can remember. I see them so often that I don't react to them. Before getting diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2, I always thought that they were just ghosts that would peep at me from around corners or run past in my peripherals. Never really told anyone about it until I started going to therapy for intrusive suicidal thoughts. Go to therapy, and within the first 6 months, I got diagnosed with bipolar type 2 about 3 years ago. It should be noted that I'm unmedicated. Moved into an older home 18 months ago, about a 90-year-old house, and it's directly down the street from a cemetery. Never really thought anything of it. Realtor joked that the quote-unquote neighbors are very quiet, and I drive by it every day without a thought. I live alone with 2 cats, and I'm used to seeing the peeping shadow people and sprinters in my peripherals, or even people that I thought were there that turned out just be straight-up hallucinations, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. Seeing stuff like that, I found out, can be symptoms of bipolar disorder. I've been seeing the same hallucination now, periodically since I moved into this house. From what I can put together, this hallucination looks like an elderly and heavyset woman. First time I saw this hallucination was when I had settled down into my home. I laid down for bed and I just began dozing off. I don't know why, but I felt like I wasn't alone. Half asleep, I opened my eyes and I saw it standing in the doorway of my room. I wasn't startled because as soon as I saw it, just kind of quickly faded away. For me, it's unusual to see the same hallucination, other than indiscernible, vaguely human-shaped shadow people. Over the past year, I've seen glimpses here and there around the house of this specific hallucination, but nothing out of my ordinary. Yesterday, I had just taken a shower after work. About 5 a.m., so still dark outside. I dried off in the bathroom. Stepping out of the bathroom, I jump out of fear. That's because this hallucination was on the other side of the door. As it began to open the door, I'm imagining it was waiting for me. It bolted down the hall as I was walking out of the bathroom. The reason I was scared was because I bumped my shoulder into it as it bolted and it freaked me out. Not sure if I'm explaining what happened well enough, but I hope the instance makes sense to someone. I'd love to hear an outsider's opinion on this. Hard for me to tell if I'm just hallucinating really bad because I live alone, or if this house is haunted. Visited by my late grandmother. I'm a little bit nervous just thinking and writing about this, but I'd like people's thoughts on my experience. I live at home with Ma'am and younger brother. Last night my brother was working at night shift, so not at home, and my Ma'am was in her own room fast asleep. I went to bed late around 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of the coffee table in my room being dragged toward my bed at around 4 a.m. I woke up startled, put out my hand to stop the coffee table, and couldn't help but shout, "What the fuck?" The room was dark, so I couldn't clearly see anything, but I got up and switched the light on. The door was closed, nobody around or awake in the house. The next day, today, I was thinking to myself, myself that was definitely not a dream, but I started doubting myself. Surely some sort of paranormal activity out of nowhere. I'm not even convinced such things really exist. However, I told my brother lightheartedly about what happened, and we're kind of joking about it until later on when I tell my mom. And it suddenly dawned on her. It was her mother's 26th anniversary. I'm now convinced this was not a vivid dream, and not a coincidence. My grandmother was very close to my mom. They'd be in our house daily when I was young. My mom also told me that it would have been around the same time in the early hours of the morning that her mom, my grandmother, passed away. Should I be worried or take this as a friendly hello from my granny? I can't help but feel a little bit freaked out. If you can't help it. They wanted me. About 2014. It was night. I opened my eyes. Strips of light from the lamp outside my window cast over my bed. Once I noticed that everything seemed a shade darker than it should have been, the fear pulled me into the mattress. My body was numbed by weight, but my eyes were able to comb through the darkness. I heard many voices whispering around. "He's ready," one said. "We want him now," said another. And they went on. Demons, I thought. Two came out of the shadows. They looked down upon me with scrutinizing expressions. Here, they almost resembled humans. They had skin that had a tragic gray and green hue. I remember panicking. My mind could only scream at my limbs, but my body was a powerless object. It felt like I was trying to break through shrink wrap bound around me. "Stop, help," I remember thinking. "Help me, Jesus, help me." And then I woke up. Everyone tells me it was sleep paralysis. Sure, that might be the case. Except they don't seem to think that sleep paralysis may include being visited by beings not of life, but of death. Skeptics are right to doubt these experiences. Don't look behind you. Summer 2017. Sometimes at night, I couldn't sleep. I'd go for a run around the neighborhood. I hadn't been doing well mentally. Running was the least destructive activity in my life. One night, I decided I'd run to the local high school. I jogged from my house down the mile stretch of road. I ended up at the football stadium. I ran a few laps around the track and started up and down the bleachers. I was feeling pretty good until something washed over me. It was the sense that I was being watched. For a split second, I thought I'd just keep going. And just as I went to climb the next step, the memory of a story that my grandfather had once told me resurfaced. One night when he was 7 or 8, my grandfather woke up to a man staring at him from outside his bedroom window. When he got close to the window, the man leapt down from the second-story ledge. My grandfather said that the man had vanished, but that an elongated animal on 4 very long legs scurried away from our house. He told this story only once, after I'd mocked native legends. Thought it was just an old man's tale. I'd forgotten his story until that moment, when chills went through my body, and I knew something was watching me. I wanted more than anything to forget about it so that I could just finish my routine. But something within, call it intuition, I guess, it urged me to leave. That fear was stronger than my thoughts of rationality as, well, fear tends to be. I called my mom and she answered. I said that I knew it was too late to bother her and that I was sorry, but that something didn't feel right at the stadium. She said, I need you to run home, and whatever you do, keep your eyes in front of you. Don't turn back. I'm going to meet you halfway. Stay on the phone. Don't hang up. I'm coming. I didn't understand why she was panicked, and I felt, overall just felt awful for bothering her. As I was exiting the stadium gates, my blood ran cold. A man in a wide-rimmed straw hat was leaning against the chain-linked fence that surrounded the campus. He was smiling. That excited smile. One I will never forget. I jogged past him and he nodded at me and said, "Time for fun." I bolted. I didn't even look back. I invoked the name of Jesus. I prayed to whatever higher power there was. I asked angels to protect me. I kept running until I saw the headlights of my mom's car. Later, she told me that when people like us have big feelings like that, it's evolutionary. The way prey can sense a predator. She suspects it was a dark creature, one that was drawn to people going through deep depression. From then on, I decided to never run alone after sunset. Summer 2019. One night, this coworker wanted to go for a run after we got off. We both worked the graveyard shift, so we agreed we'd go to the track at the high school since it was open and not too far from work. We arrived, just chatting carefree, complaining about work and walking up through the front gates. As we stepped foot onto the track, she stopped and said, "I don't like this place." I froze and I looked at her. "Why?" I asked. She just shook her head and whispered, "Something evil lives here." I took her hand immediately, walking us back to the gate toward the car. I remembered my mom's advice. I told her, "Don't look behind you." I hadn't told a soul about my initial experience before that. My coworker said it felt like someone was following right behind us until we got into the car. I'll never go back there. Never. What is real and what's just a story? So, just to give context, I'm a Filipino living in the city of Manila. I was born and raised here, but I've never really belonged or really considered myself so much as one, really, since our family's mixed and part European. So I don't have all that conservative and superstitious characteristics that they usually have. Even so, I don't rob myself from enjoying some local folklore, legends, stories perhaps, and even beliefs that we have, such as local ghosts, mythical creatures, and deities. And we call them diwata. I've always enjoyed the horror and fantasy genre of things as well, and history. My interest in it first sort of picked from reading English and Italian literature. But I've always thought that, like everyone else, those are just stories. Something that we only use for imagination and maybe entertainment. But my younger brother and I experienced something so crazy, scary, and wild that even after 27 years, I still remember everything vividly. So it was around the year of 2003. Can't remember the month, but all I remember is that we still had school at that time. We suddenly moved from the city to the nearest province. Oh boy. Peraniki or Paranek to Cavite. My apologies. I cannot speak this language. Because we couldn't afford the last house that we were renting anymore. So, new school, new house, new neighbors. This new house was a 2-story house with 2 rooms on the second floor. and behind the house is the animal farm of one of her neighbors. We call him Mang Johnny. So, sometimes at night, the animals would be heard making noises, or the dogs barking or fighting. And of course, it did produce that farm smell as well. But me and my brother wouldn't mind at times, since we enjoyed the cool breeze, and the province has to offer this, especially in a hot tropical country like ours. So we'd leave the window wide open, especially at night, since that's pretty much coldest around those times. One night, lights closed. My brother woke me up, but in a very hushed way, like whispering. It was 3 a.m. that time, I think, because I checked my PSP, which I had underneath my pillow. And I was even annoyed at him because it was the weekend and I just wanted to savor all the sleep we could get. So I just said, "What?" Then in a very scared but low voice he said, "There's someone at the window." And I'm like, what the fuck? Why? Why would somebody be there unless someone's on the roof, which is below our windows, the roof of our storage room and restroom? But I was kind of still sleepy, so I haven't really focused on or absorbed what he was saying. Then when I looked at her window, I immediately woke up, eyes wide. While slowly going down from the ladder of our bunk bed, I could clearly see a shadowy figure of someone outside her window. And since we left it open, its hand was latched at the edge of the window, and it was long and black. And by the way, our window was that sort of blurred glass type. My brother and I stood there for 2 or 3 minutes, I think, like from shock from what we were seeing, and being scared of making more noises and movements that could potentially make things worse. My brother started saying that he's getting so scared and I don't even know what to do or how to remove its hand from the edge so I could sort of close the window completely. And since both of us are too chicken to do it, we both started egging each other on for who should do it. Because the noise that we were making that time, the hand for some reason started to slide going outside. I don't know, it probably heard how scared we were and how we were planning to close it, so might pin its hand in the process. But then my brother, surprisingly, he was able to muster the courage and immediately went for the handle and closed it right away. After that, the shadow just stayed there. It didn't move or anything. And it just slowly dawned on me that throughout the whole ordeal, the animals from the farm were going ballistic and noisy, like insane wild. The dogs barking and howling, and chickens clucking and flapping their wings, pigs and everything. It was very windy that night for some reason. Anyway, after that, we told her grandmother what happened, and since then, she forbade us to ever opening her window again, taped papers with Bible verses on it. She's very religious, of course. Ever since that experience, I've always wondered, is there a possibility that those kinds of things are real? Creatures and monsters? And what else could be real out there? So what about souls, or aliens, or time travel, or multiverse? Those crazy Greek gods, or God? Thinking about it fucks up my mind and my perception of reality. What's real and what's just a story? Whenever I remember this, it always triggers my existential crisis, as well as my never-ending curiosity and fear of the unknown. How alone are we really in this time or life? And now that we're adults, I recently asked my brother about what happened that night. He said that he couldn't remember it anymore, but our grandma does. The weight. The purpose of sleep paralysis is to paralyze your body during the sleep state, to protect you from injury or unnecessary conflict whilst inside the dream world. The problem arises when some people awake during sleep paralysis and can't move. Whilst not being able to move, many report seeing entities, such as shadow figures, animals, angels, and the list goes on. After the strange episodes they wake up and life goes on. Here's the question, though, that are hallucinations real or just a figment of the creative mind? The most common deduction is yes. Seeing entities while in sleep paralysis is that of temporary hallucinatory behavior, and should not be viewed in literality. Is that a word? However, what about those who aren't necessarily paralyzed, but rather pushed down into their beds? I've awakened during sleep paralysis before, although I've never seen anything creepy or frightening while in sleep paralysis in my life. I remember the distinct feeling of not being able to use my limbs, hence the name sleep paralysis. Although when I spoke to my father about these episodes of mine, he informed me that there was a difference between a literal attack from an unknown force and just being paralyzed due to the body's natural mechanisms. He told me about times when he was attacked by real demonic forces. Due to personal reasons, I will not be describing his story. One key thing that stuck out to me about all the stories of his, is the fact that not only could he not move during the attacks, but he felt actual weight, as though something was holding him down with invisible hands. Now, I've had plenty of episodes where I've awakened during sleep paralysis, and not once, I remember clearly of course, have I ever felt invisible hands holding me down to the bed, or any slight tugging on my body for that matter. Ever since my dad told me those stories about what happened to him, I found that there are plenty of people who have encountered the same thing. The weight is what I call it. I decided to leave this post here, because I'm one of the few that does believe in science and to a degree a strong critic of anything supernatural. But I cannot ignore any anomaly when I hear or come across one. The topic of sleep paralysis is a very tricky one, but I think if we can pinpoint on whether or not the paralysis episode was that of numbness or literal weight being placed on certain limbs of the body, it'll determine on whether or not said experience was that of natural body mechanics or the spirit world. I recently moved to a new house, and I heard whistling all night. My mother bought a new house in the Appalachian Mountains. Congratulations. We've always lived in the area, but we used to live in a valley that the mountains created. This is our first time ever being right on the top of the mountains. My mother and her boyfriend are Christian, while me and my younger sister were what you might call spiritualist, maybe pantheism. My family is also Wyandot Native American descendant from my great-grandmother, who my mother was incredibly close to. I've encountered many spirits before. However, my family has always politely considered me and my sister crazy for trying to keep ourselves safe from spirits. I've had spiritual encounters before, many scary ones where I almost felt my soul was taken. But this was the first time I felt like my life was genuinely about to end. We live in an old coal mining town, but the old owners spent almost 2 years renovating to make the house comfortable and livable. It's incredibly windy, but having lived in windy areas before, I know the difference between wind blowing by or through a window. It's also a freezing February, and it's so cold I'd rather leap into the snow than open a window right now. It was maybe 9 p.m. I was in the bathroom when I first heard it. It was that really distinct sound of a human whistle. No one had My house knows how to whistle, and none of the shows that we watched contained that sort of whistling. My mother and her boyfriend started suddenly arguing soon after, but they had nothing to argue about. Went upstairs and heard it all night long. Started reading a book and put on noise-canceling headphones with a drama video on to ignore it. But I just kept hearing it. It was a human whistle. The way you'd call your dog or somebody back to you while hiking. But also like a very accurate bird song. We have neighbors, but they keep to themselves and usually use their dogs' names to call them back, not whistling. I felt incredibly unsafe. The only similar feeling I can describe was when I was being followed home one night. But he stopped following me when he realized I knew he was there. Incredibly tense with adrenaline and complete nausea of anxiety. I just kept ignoring it, even though it sounded just out of my window. But every time I would sneak a glance, nothing was there or changed. It just kept whistling. Sometimes whistling over itself. I eventually fell asleep, but kept waking up every other hour because I still heard it. By about 4 a.m., when my baby sister started crying, I felt the adrenaline had completely stopped. She seemed pretty scared, but my mother eventually calmed her back to bed. But when we were in the kitchen, our lights had started leaking the fluid that turns them on. Excuse me? Alrighty then. I heard somebody tapping on her back screen door in the kitchen, as if gently knocking. But no one ever called back when I said hello from the living room, so I didn't answer. I just don't feel entirely safe here, but I feel my mother wouldn't understand my fear. I have anxiety, but it's never affected my perception of reality or my religion. I don't take any medicines, food, or drinks that would affect that either. I plan to buy a dream catcher for my room, alongside maybe a rock-solid lamp. I brought my amethyst, my biggest quartz here, because I felt called to before I left. I'll probably leave those on the windows with a bowl of salt near my bed, but I'm not sure if there's anything else I can do. I want to know the medium of light that you have that is fluid-based. Suppose that's my own curiosity. My only experience of the paranormal. Ow. These memories are old, around 17 years ago. While still pretty young, would have discounted it entirely if it weren't for my family members also having had experiences in that house. I'd love to hear both skeptic and believers, if you all would be so kind. Careful what you wish for. To give a short introduction for context, I have an issue with my eyes that causes me to see a very fine amount of static at all times. Dr. Google has a lot of answers, and asking an actual doctor didn't get me very far. This will be important later. Other important information. The house this took place in was very small. Even when I was a young child, it felt tight. It was a one-story house with a basement, unfinished with old and thin wooden stairs. The living room was the biggest room, with a couch that faced away from me and my sister's shared bedroom. Now, like previously mentioned, the account I will share with you soon happened at night, and as time passed, I gave it a little bit of thought as it seemed impossible. I mentioned one of my experiences to my family, and they mentioned their own strange sights in the house. previously mentioned couch sometimes had feet that could be seen from behind the couch. Though, when he went to look, no one was there, obviously. Another time that my father was coming up from the basement to yell at us for running on said stairs. He passed the main hallway and saw a woman with glasses and a red sweater staring back at him in shock. His momentum had carried him past the entrance, and so he quickly stepped back to see who... Sir. His momentum had carried him past the entrance, and so he quickly stepped back to see who this intruder was, to yet again find no one there. My own lesser cases of feeling like somebody was massaging my feet some nights, which I have to say is some of the most base primal terror I've felt in my life. I'll take it. A few other things. Your usual skittering feet on the stairs only to find the kids, being us, in their room playing with Legos. Whispers on rare occasions and not much else past that. Now, having recently asked my family for their stories in more detail, it just makes me feel more unsure. So I now share my story with all of you. I'm perfectly fine with being wrong. I do, in fact, welcome any feedback. So, I just got into bed. It was Easter night, and I was excited for the egg hunt tomorrow. Couldn't sleep. My siblings had already fallen asleep, and I could hear my parents faintly in the basement working. The more I thought about sleep, the more I couldn't seem to reach it. It got late into the night. I heard my parents go to bed, and I'd become thirsty at this point. Wanted to ask them for water before they fell asleep, so I got up. It was very dark and my vision was impaired slightly by the aforementioned static already, so I really took my time getting out of bed. Reaching the door, I gently pulled it open and I felt a feeling creep onto me that I wasn't alone anymore. The light to the basement kept the hallway in front of me lit. The street shot into the living room, an orangish yellow that only kept it bright enough to move. It felt like something was getting closer to me, although I didn't hear anything. Being a young child, I froze and squinted my eyes, hoping whatever it was didn't notice me. Nothing seemed to change, and standing in the open felt like more danger than standing still. So I opened my eyes, prepared to cower back into the bedroom. And that's when I noticed something I'd never seen before or after in my life. The static seemed concentrated. The visual fuzz formed a mass in the dark. It floated with no real distinguishing forms. It was near me. Now I would assume it would be some sort of eye spot or just something a little off in my brain. But it was something that nothing else had been. Consistent. It moved away, moved my head and my eyes to test if there was something there. It didn't move with my vision. Even as I looked at it from the corner of my eye, it remained the same. The realization had fully set in. There was indeed something hovering in the dark near me. Couldn't tell you why, but I felt as if it were facing me. I looked at it longer and felt my fear slip quite a bit. It then moved. It moved downward toward the hallway, and then stopped, as if a dog trying to lead me somewhere. Brought my hands together and interlocked them in front of my chest, self-soothed and followed. Sorry, I just hit myself. I can still see it in my head. The dim hallway with a swirling mass of static. Creepy on the surface, but for some reason not too scary at the time. We made our way through the living room to the kitchen. That's when it stood next to the kitchen sink. I followed it and waited watching it. I looked at the sink, then back to it. If it had led me there for the water, then we were both out of luck, as I was far too small still to reach the sink or the cups. I'm sure that feeling was written on my face. It slowly floated back toward the hallway, assuming I'm right about its intention, or if it had any intentions at all. So turning myself to follow it back to my bedroom, very much deciding that water could wait till tomorrow morning, that's when I noticed something else new in the space. 2 figures. They were sitting on the couch. Though, as I couldn't see the front of the couch, I suppose they could have been there the whole time. They sat in the darkest part of the couch, as the basement light couldn't reach the seat. One of the figures was small. The other seemed to be an adult, though looking back, I believe it could have been elderly by its posture. My fear returned and deepened at these new things. I did not feel safe being in their line of sight. Unfortunately, I would have to walk near them again to return to my bedroom. I probably would have frozen then too, but I was desperate to stay close to the static mass as it moved on without me. I shuffled quickly back behind it. I felt a bit better once I was on the back end of the couch. I made it nearly halfway past the couch when I heard something. I only paused a moment to let my ear try to pick out the sound. It was muttering. I heard one voice muttering as if through multiple walls. It was faint, and I couldn't make out anything but basically just the tone. I don't remember this part well, though. I didn't understand what the tone of voice was, but it was clearly a strong emotion. I began moving again, and the mutterings sped up. I also didn't know in a conscious way what this really meant, but I felt like a mouse staring a cat down and seeing it take the position to pounce. I shuffled fast, even past the static figure that was still making its way down the hallway, never taking my eyes off the top and sides of the couch. I was waiting for something to peek around its edge and get a look at me. At the time, I was certain a stranger's face would peek over, see me, and maybe charge me down. I may have been too young to know exactly what death was, but I knew subconsciously, like every animal does. Nothing did peek its head over or around. I just shuffled back to my room and walked through the door. The static mass did not make a move to enter, but once I had begun to close the door, it became softly drifting back down the hallway again. I went to bed and I lay there for a few hours until exhaustion finally took me. I woke up the next morning with fuzzy memories, but otherwise it was like it never even happened. That's all generally a one-off experience that did not repeat in any way, really, but giving you the best account I have from memory. I excluded anything that I couldn't remember fully to avoid wasting time with what I, couldn't be sure of. Now, some parts of this confused me a lot as a kid, and I've communicated what I felt and saw the best of my ability, but obviously, there's going to be gaps. Part of this I've written here are only the parts that were burned into my memory, otherwise known as only the parts I could remember with some certainty. I generally avoided talking about it when I was still living there. I just hoped not talking about it would keep it from happening again in some way. House is still there, though. I doubt the new tenants would allow me back for the night as a stranger adult who's looking for some sort of answers. I'm personally leaning toward this just being nothing but circumstances, and the figures on the couch having been my fear getting the better of me. I do not have any history of hallucinating, though once again I do have the issues of the faint static. And at the end of the day, I'm unsure, and I'd love to frankly be persuaded into one direction or the other. I think there's a spirit in my house. So there are 3 different stories I want to share about things that have happened in my house. It's probably worth noting that at least one person has in fact died in this house. My wife and I purchased this house 5 years ago, after her aunt, the previous owner, passed away in the living room area. Additionally, our aunt's dog was put down the same day she died. It was in her will. The dog was 17 years old, blind, deaf, and couldn't stand on his own without somebody holding him. So he needed major help just eating and going potty outside. He also had a moderate case of cancer. I feel like I need to mention these things because I think there's a lingering spirit in the house. Story 1. A few months after moving in, my father-in-law came to visit and stay the night in the guest bedroom. This room contains our internet modem and router, which emits a very bright blinking set of lights. At around 4 p.m., my father-in-law asked if we could put some electrical tape over the blinking light so it'd be easier for him to sleep later. So we did. We all then left the house, and we all went out for dinner. Back at home at around 8 p.m., we noticed the modem and router no longer had electrical tape covering the lights. Weird. 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 We all asked each other if anybody removed the tape. Nope. I inspected the router all over, near the floor and everything. No sign of any tape. My father-in-law decided he'd just turn the router around and place his duffel bag in front of it to block the lights. The following morning, we were eating breakfast. I go into the spare bedroom because our internet stopped working. Thought I needed to reboot the router or see if my father-in-law accidentally unplugged something. It was then that I discovered the electrical tape was once again covering the lights. It wasn't wrinkled, nor did it show signs of dust from, possibly falling off. So I asked my father-in-law if he reapplied tape, and he said no. In fact, he doesn't know where they even, keep the electrical tape. So he couldn't even have done this if he wanted to. All 3 of us vividly remember the electrical tape being completely absent before going to bed. The light emitted from the router is hard to mistake. It's obnoxiously bright, and if, tape were on it the night before, it would have been obvious. So, yeah. Somehow the tape was completely removed and reapplied, and nobody claims they did it. Story 2. And by the way, electrical tape can fall off and you can put it back on without it being wrinkled or dusty. I do it every day. Yet, story number 2. This happened last year. My wife was tired, wanted to take a nap at around 5 p.m. So I'm in the living room watching Netflix, and after about 20 minutes, I hear a faint crying sound coming from her bedroom. I quietly make my way over and lean toward the bedroom door. It distinctly sounded like my wife was crying, but trying to keep it quiet. I go to open the door and comfort her. However, the door is locked. I sent her a text message telling her that I'm here if she needs anything. No response, so I figured she wanted to be left alone. So I go back to watching Netflix. 45 minutes pass and I can still hear the crying. So I go back again to check on her and attempt to open the door. This time the door is unlocked. The very moment that I touched this door handle, the crying stopped immediately. So I'm thinking to myself, what on earth is she keeping from me? And as I entered the room, prepared to comfort her for anything. However, as I entered the room, I noticed she was completely asleep. She even had a bit of drool going on, and her breathing pattern indicated that she was in fact asleep. There's no way she could fake being asleep that good, and so abruptly as well. So I just gently woke her up and asked if everything was okay. She seemed really confused, like she had to reassure me several times that A, I'm fine, really. B, I have no idea what you're talking about. She wears her heart on her sleeve, so I know there's no way she could keep something like that from me. She's a terrible actor, and I'm genuinely convinced that someone or something was crying in that room. But I'm simultaneously convinced it wasn't my wife. Story number 3. This is a short one, and it happened on Valentine's Day this year. I'm getting ready to leave, and we're doing some last-minute tidying up. We typically try to clear the floors of all objects so we can turn on our Roomba before we leave. We've had our Roomba for about 6 years, and it's never once malfunctioned or done anything weird. My wife was across the house and she yells to me, "About ready?" I respond, "Yeah, I just gotta turn on the Roomba, then I'm coming." No sooner did those words leave my mouth than our Roomba turned on all by itself. I wasn't even in the same room, and it makes this distinct ding sound when it turns on, so there's no mistaking it. I go check the Roomba's charging station, and sure enough, the Roomba is already on and doing its thing. Our Roomba is a mid-range model. Doesn't have cameras or a microphone, so there's no way I could have done some kind of voice-activated thing. It's just so bizarre. The one and only time it's ever turned on, quote-unquote, by itself is when I loudly verbalized that I wanted to turn it on. Which won't work on people. Toddler noises between the woods. This experience has my whole family in chills, and we need a rational explanation for it. It happened on last Christmas. My grandparents' house is in the middle of the woods. Our whole family has this yearly get-together kind of thing during Christmas. We were preparing dinner and my aunt was taking a nap. Well, she started screaming, twitching. She woke up in a cold sweat. She started mumbling nonsense about seeing visions of mangled toddlers creepily smiling and walking towards her. Boy, we thought she went crazy until it was bedtime. My grandfather crawled into his bed to go to sleep when he suddenly started to hear a toddler's voice saying, "Mama, Mama." Probably not quite like that. According to him, the voice started to progress and got louder. And by the way, there's no kids in our house. My grandfather's house is also in the middle of nowhere between the woods. And I'm assuming other woods. That means that we do not have neighbors close by either. My cousin, who was scrolling his phone while sitting on the toilet, started to hear the same sound around the same time grandfather heard it. And by the way, the toilet is at the far right of the house, and grandfather's room is at the far left. So there's no way of them that they could have heard a voice from different directions at the same time. So, my mother and myself were sharing a bed that day. She woke up to the voices of a toddler giggling and saying, "Mama." Our dog, an 8-month-old lab, was barking and growling crazily that night. It was so not like him. That furry dude is friendly with anyone and everyone. Same thing happened to my uncle, father, dad, and grandmother. And all of them woke up to the sounds of a supposedly cursed toddler. The weirdest part being that I heard the sound from different parts of the woods. Now, I'm a terrific sleeper, and I was oblivious to the situation until my cousin yeeted me out of my sleep. It's the first time I've ever said that word, but I've heard of this word. Yeeted. Yeeted. Does that mean thrown? So we all grabbed bunch of flashlights and searched all around the area but found nothing. It resulted in a midnight family meeting with my grandmother claiming that it was her deceased son who died as a toddler coming to see her. My uncle claiming it was the work of a thief. My aunt, too, saying that it was her deceased baby brother showing his rage as we forgot to light a candle on his grave last year. My grandfather saying that it was a wild animal and so on. We almost forgot about this experience until recently when we visited the house and we were awakened by footsteps and some kind of soft murmurs. My aunt and uncle were just saying they kept on hearing something rolling on the roof. This was for days prior to this experience. I do not believe in your typical ghosts, otherwise known as the vengeful white-robed woman with pale skin and black hair looking for revenge. But I do hope to get a rational explanation for the experience. So I ask you, has anyone had any similar experiences? Share your opinions about what it could have been. Also, I don't strongly believe in ghosts as of now, but I am willing to learn about their possible existence. I also don't really think there are any supposedly cursed objects in the house other than a copy of The Crying Boy. So I slept in the same house again, and I had a terrible nightmare. A family with 4 daughters were living in this house. One of their daughters went missing, and it was later revealed she was killed and buried in the garden by her father. At the end of the dream, I remembered that sister's ghost haunting the other sisters. Is it just my overactive brain making up stories? I don't know. I vividly remember the faces of the people I saw in my dream. As far as I'm aware, you're not physically capable of dreaming about people whom you've never seen in your life. Definitely incorrect. I'm definitely not staying over at my grandparents' home again anytime soon. I would ask your father or your dad. That's 2 times the amount of answers that you can get. And 2 times more than most. What could it have been? It's been years. I was about 11 or 12 years old when this happened. I was with about 3 or 4 cousins of mine at their house. I had gone to visit for the day along with my older sister. That's because she was babysitting all of us, given that, well, all of our parents had gone to work and we were left alone. Anywho, the story starts in what would be the backyard of the main house. That's when my uncle bought this property. It had sort of a ran-down house behind it. Behind the main house. Or the previously mentioned backyard. And us as kids, well, we would go in there and play and whatnot, and this day was no different. We were playing, having fun, being kids. But all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, people see my sister, and she is leaning against the wall of this said ran-down house. So we were confused a bit, but we call her name out, thinking nothing of it, and I remember her face, and it was blank. Never made eye contact, never cracked a smile, nothing. Her eyes were just wide. They were wide open. I'll never forget it. And we're all at a standstill, calling her name out, hoping that she'll snap out of this and laugh. But she wouldn't move. And then suddenly she just took off running. She ran through the right side of the house. We ran through the left, thinking she was playing a prank on us, maybe to scare us. We decided that we'd all run to the main house and catch her in the act. Now, there is space on both sides of this ran-down house because both sides have driveways. But there's a catch. The side we ran through, the left side, had a gate, and the only gate is at the main house, and the other side that she went through, being the right side, didn't. So even if she hopped that 6 to 8 feet tall fence separating the house, We would have beat her to the punch and caught her. So we ran the same distance, but of course she had obstacles. Well, we didn't. Anywho, we made it to the house, and there she was, cooking normal. Well, normal as could be in this instance, and she was taking care of my then baby cousin. She wasn't fatigued, not tired, not out of breath. Nothing. And we came in out of breath, so we asked what this was all about, and she looked at us confused, like we were insane. Well, freaked out, told her what had just happened, and she swore up and down she didn't have anything to do with that. Until this day, I asked her to give it up, and 8 or 9 years later, she still says she has nothing to do with that, and I kind of believe her. That's because I don't just see it possible in no way, shape, or form. So I come to ask if it wasn't her, who could it have been, or what could it have been? Forgot to mention, there's about a 10-foot distance between these two houses. So if she did in fact run back to the house and jump that fence and so on, we would have saw her trying to jump that fence and trying to run. And also when my uncle, when he bought this house, the main house was riddled with satanic type of stuff. So if I had to guess, maybe that could have came into play, but I don't know. Let me know. It's been 8 or 9 years, and LOL, need answers. I'd like you to define riddled with satanic type of stuff. End quote. My time working in a bar, once frequented by Al Capone. Several years ago, I was a local legend. For lack of a better term, at least in the bars where I lived. I bartender, I DJ'd, and I bounced. I'd taken a summer off and a friend called me. The next town over was a historic building, and in the basement of this building was a bar. Al Capone used to visit it during Prohibition, and legend is many people died there. This building was once a thriving bar and hotel but closed down. Not really quite sure why. It was also known to be one of the most haunted places in the area. Anyone that's ever visited there had stories. So, that being said, here's mine. The friend that called me said her friend, that we're going to call Julie, was bartending at this place. They were trying to reopen it. They wanted me to DJ and pull double duty and bounce. I said sure. I showed up a couple of hours before opening. I met Julie. She was waiting outside for me, refusing to be alone inside. We went in and she made me go to the restroom with her. My back was turned because she was too afraid to even do that alone. We waited in the office for the owner to show. We made small talk, but I kept looking over my shoulder. Julie noticed and said, "Yeah, they're watching us." I'm not exactly sure how long we were talking before I heard footsteps on the upper floor. Julie, who's a redhead, somehow turned paler. I wanted to go to investigate, but she wouldn't let me. Soon the noises grew, sounding like a chair or bed was being dragged across the floor. The owner showed up and we went to the bar to set up. He joked about ghosts and told me some tales about what he had seen and heard when he was alone there. The word was out about the bar, but since it was sort of out of the way in a small town, not a lot of people showed up. We ended up closing around midnight. I helped clean up and we all left together. As I was pulling out, I noticed a face in the window on the second floor. Not the most extreme of experiences, but it was strong. I could feel the fact that I was being watched. I never went back either. I was in my office today. That's when one of the guys came and got me. We have a giant industrial dryer that runs at over 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, there's no small-sized people here. Everyone wears extra large size gloves or larger. Nobody can reach the drum of the dryer unless they're on the ladder. It's a big dryer. I followed him to his work, and as it turned, there it was. A child-sized handprint in the dust, clear as day. Seemed like my little friend is making the rounds. The company where I work runs 3 shifts. I work the tail end of the 3rd and most of the 1st. I never mentioned it to anybody what I saw under my desk, though the aforementioned child's handprint is known by everyone now. This morning I came into my guys freaking out. They were up in the system working, around 40 feet from the ground. That's when one of them saw a little boy running around in pajamas. There's only 2 guys that, work nights, and, they were together. So they climbed down the ladders to the floor and searched for an hour for this kid. They said at one point they heard him giggle. And this is too strange not to be the same apparition I saw at my feet a few weeks back. Don't know if this was a ghost or what. I'm hoping to get some feedback on something unusual I experienced a few years ago. And, by the way, I've always been a bit skeptical of paranormal phenomena. But this encounter has stayed with me. I want to share what happened and see if anybody else has had a similar experience, or perhaps can offer insights. So, this happened when I was 16. It was around 7 or 8 p.m. I was in my fully lit bedroom. I was scrolling through Instagram. Sorry for that. I was awake and fully aware of my surroundings when suddenly my alarm clock turned on by itself and started playing Cake by the Ocean. Random detail, I know. Cake by the Ocean. I remember feeling a bit of uneasiness at that moment, like something was off in the room. But I wasn't alone. I looked up and there, right next to my alarm clock, this is what I can only describe as a humanoid entity. It wasn't solid, but rather it seemed to be made of light. The light was bending in a way that formed the shape of a person. Arms, legs, head, torso, but no fine features. It was like a distortion of light, kind of like a heat mirage. The room also seemed a little brighter than normal. Almost like the entity was somehow affecting the electricity, or perhaps even the environment. I remember feeling terrified, but also knowing that whatever it was there clear as day. My eyes started watering and I couldn't speak. I ended up slowly backing out of the room, closing the door and running upstairs to get my dad. When we went back down, it was gone. I've never experienced anything like this since. And I know some might chalk it up to a vivid imagination or something, maybe psychological, but it felt real. My mom also mentioned that I had an imaginary friend when I was little. She said a psychic once even mentioned it. It's always stuck with me, and now I'm wondering if there's any connection to what I saw years later. I'm curious if anybody else, sort of slurred that, I'm curious if anyone else has had similar encounters with light-based or energy entities, or if you have any insights into what I might have experienced. Thanks for reading, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Worst experience. It was the last day of June 30th. My stepdad worked at a motorcycle shop. It was next to the Native American reservation. This particular day, me and Mom had to go help him at work. That's because they were moving buildings to somewhere about a mile away, and thank God. My stepdad had told me a sorry about something that happened there, which we will assume they meant story. And it was was a story that was paranormal-wise, and I've always believed in the paranormal, by the way. Ever since I was really little, I've heard voices and stuff. I've seen things that weren't there, or things would fly across my room and shit. So my stepdad had told me one time he was exhausted from the summer heat. He was working all day. He was vulnerable. And that's when demons and shit can get to you. He said he was talking to my mom, and next thing he knew, he was leaving the building. But what had happened was, he choked my mom out. He'd almost killed her. She had a broken nose and choke marks, and this would have been something he could have done if he were... This is something that wouldn't have been something he could have done if he wasn't possessed. My stepdad was never scrawny at all, but he was about 160 pounds and 5'8"-ish. My mom was like 5'11", 245. Two other people saw this happen and said his eyes went black. His whole demeanor changed. He eventually overpowered it and dropped her, leaving the place on his motorcycle. Once he crossed the bridge away from the Native American res, he had to pull to the corner because he felt sick and puked up black goo. He went over to the cop that was at the other corner and asked if he had seen him. Cop said no. He never even heard the motorcycle, in fact. So this night it was my turn to have an experience. Oh boy. An experience that secured my belief in the incident that happened and in the paranormal itself. Public service announcement. If you don't believe in the paranormal, you likely won't unless you've had an experience with it. Very true. The night was normal. It was about 9 p.m. I was going to the Walmart a little bit away. I was going with my mom to get food since everyone was hungry. We got to the Walmart, but we had out our dog with us, and my mom decided to stay in the car with him while I went in with her phone to get groceries. I go into the store, and I'm looking for stuff, and I was about to call my stepdad on my mom's phone. Didn't have a phone at the time since I was much younger. So I'm about to call my stepdad and see what kind of flavor of yogurt he wanted, but he called me. I answered the phone and I hear, "Hi." And I said, "Hey, good thing you called me. I was just about to call you and see what kind of..." And I was cut off by, "Hi, hi, hi." I was like, "Hello?" And all I got was, "Hey, hi, hi." And then the hang-up tone. I freaked out. I called him back and I was like, "What'd you do that for?" And he was like, "What? What do you need? I was on the phone with my boss." And my heart fucking sunk. I told him what happened, and he told me not to worry. I worried. He said, "Get whatever." So I hurried and got food and left. I went down and told my mom what happened, and she said to just ignore it too. I was getting in the car and we were about to leave and a message came through on her phone. "What's your name, little one?" Expletive, expletive, expletive. I screamed, "What the fuck?" And I started saying, "Stop, Dad, this isn't funny." We got there and I confronted him. He said he didn't know and just kind of blew it off again. Me and my mom were going into this room to unstock the shelves of all the nuts and bolts and screws and tape and small shit like that. But the lighting in this room was insanely bright, and the music was louder in here than all the others. It was too much for me after a bit, and I just got extremely nauseous. My mom was directing me to leave, as I said, she's 5'11", and I was about 5'3" at the time, so she's much taller. She had her arm over my shoulder and opening the door, and as I turned, I saw an almost 6-foot black shadow figure of a man. So I hear, "Get out!" And me and my mom fucking ran. I felt fucking sick. It was hard to breathe and it was hot as fuck outside. There's a lot of you-know-what's-key words in this story. For those that are offended, that is not me. So we went and told my dad, and even he looked scared. I was fucking terrified. Me, my mom, and dad all had to go lock up the merch room. And I was the one who had to lock the door. I felt fucking sick. But my stepdad and mom were too pussy to do it. I went over and was locking the door, and I hear, I'm not going to use my real stepdad's name, but we'll just call him Joe. Joe! In an almost little girl song voice. I messed that up. I fucking froze. I looked back, and so did my mom and stepdad, and my mom goes, "It just called his name." And we all fucking ran. My stepdad had this look in his face, and he looked like he was about to puke. More shit happened, little shit. Kept hearing our names being called, all kinds of stuff. Eventually we left, and I'll never go back there. And by the way, if you've ever seen a Native American bent marking tree, they're trees that are tied by rope when you're growing, so they have a bend near the base. And there was one outside of this place. Wonder why they do that. About a year or two later, me and my mom and stepdad all went on vacation. We went up north. And up north, there was this supposed haunted mansion. And there was a bent tree there, too. Also, that place was also very haunted. Also, it had Native American print on the windows. And the people who lived there were friends with Native Americans. Also, there was a Native American pottery. I think I met a spiritual entity. This is kind of weird for me to talk about. I've always had a doubt in my mind about these experiences I've had, but maybe I'm crazy, or maybe I hallucinated them. I have had a few paranormal things happen to me. I'll start with the first, most intense experience first. This happened about 8 years ago or so. I was 20, I think, and lived in an apartment with my brother and some friends. A week prior, I had a friend over, and he offered me DMT, dimethyltryptamine. It was my first time ever trying it, and so I accepted. I smoked it, but nothing at all happened. Just a weird visual in my head when I closed my eyes. Then, after a few seconds, it was just gone. There was this feeling that remained, though. Some extra feeling that had never been there before. It felt very real, but very subtle. I was never into meditation, but I decided to meditate and focus on that feeling. Well, I did, and every day I did, so I sort of felt my sanity start to slip. I felt presences around me. After a week of this, one day there was no one in the apartment, and I was sitting in the kitchen. The kitchen was upstairs, and I was sitting on a bar stool on the counter. The stairs to the kitchen area were to my back. And all of a sudden, I felt that feeling again, but more stronger than I ever felt before. It didn't feel like it was just a feeling inside me anymore. It felt like it was outside of me. Like I said, I felt my sanity, or at least what I believed was my normal behavior. I felt it slipping. So I called out loud while my back was facing the stairs. "Come closer." I actually heard footsteps, some clinking of chains or something moving up the stairs. I didn't dare look behind me. I didn't want to disturb whatever this experience was. I called it again. "Come closer." Whatever that feeling was became stronger and stronger, like it really was moving closer. The air actually felt electrified. My whole body was vibrating. I Felt very intense, like it was in the presence of something very powerful. Can't remember if I said come closer again, but what happened next was I felt its hand on my shoulders. As soon as that happened, I felt a bolt of electricity run from the bottom of my spine out the top of my head. When it reached my head, I saw in my mind a picture of a flower blooming. And then I saw myself. The back of my head. I was looking at myself through its eyes. My hands were like a furry black paw. I was wearing some sort of robe or some sort of cloak, like the ones the Jedi wear in Star Wars. I looked like a dog creature, and I had big pointy black ears. I saw my furry paws resting on my own shoulders. I can remember what happened next, or rather, I just can't remember. But my brother came back home a little while later, and I didn't tell him. At the time, we both worked at a ski resort, and that night was the 85th or so anniversary. So we got in the car and drove him through the canyon up the resort in his truck. And I felt like I could feel everything almost, like a sixth sense of some kind. I felt like I could feel the flow of the cars in front of me and behind me, like a rhythm or current that was connecting everything. What I felt the most, though, was my brother. I felt this sharp anxiety building up. About 20 or so minutes into the drive, he turned to me and I could tell that he was agitated. He told me he needed to go do something weird. He rolled down the windows and started to yell, just yelling like the anxiety built up so much that he needed to release it. And I could sense it, feel it before he even turned to me. When we got there, I went to the employee lounge, and I'm not really sure where my brother went. I just sat in a corner soberly for a while, concentrating on the feeling I still had. I still felt like I could feel some extra-dimensional energy or whatever that was connecting everything and influencing everything. That sounds super woo-woo, but it's pretty much exactly what I felt. More people started to come into the employee lounge, and it was sort of around evening time. Forgot to mention that. Some were pretty drunk and off the clock, and some were on the clock on a break. I don't remember if it was all of a sudden it happened or just suddenly I was more aware. But I could see with my eyes open, but not exactly with my eyes. It's hard to describe. I was seeing physical reality in front of me. People talking to each other and laughing and having a good time, while vividly in my mind's eye, I could see in the center of each person looked like a sun, orange, yellow, and on fire with solar flares emanating out. The flares would sort of play with another person's flare, and when each flare stopped interacting with the other, 10 or so seconds later the person would move on and talk to someone else. I observed this a few times and realized I could sort of predict when two people would stop interacting before they actually did. I've thought about it a lot, and if I'm not crazy, I think what I saw was the absolute core of each person. Maybe what people describe as the soul. After this, I never really experienced anything this vivid or intense again, except perhaps some bouts of intense anxiety afterwards. I think it was related to the strong feelings, but not being able to comprehend them or know what to do with them. Not being able to just ride the current or whatever it was that I did easily the first time. The very last time I felt the feeling I was at a Cafe Rio with a buddy of mine. For some reason I stopped a worker there. A young Caucasian lady, and I talked to her. Can't even remember about what, but I just did. I felt like a tether of electricity between us when I was talking. Not just some vague feeling. It was very tangible. I could almost see it in my mind's eye, like seeing something in your periphery. I didn't even talk to her for very long about anything important, I don't think. She looked kind of shell-shocked. Her eyes were a little wide, and she was kind of staring at me. I don't think she really answered my conversation with anything substantial. It seemed like I was going with the flow of whatever the feeling is. She was extremely distracted by it. My buddy was standing a few feet away, and he basically emphatically told me, after I stopped talking to her, "What the hell was that?" He said he could actually feel a connection between us vividly. He had the same look in his eyes like she did, sort of spooked. This encounter with the woman and my friend is the only actual proof I have to myself that something did actually happen to me. I didn't have a full-blown episode. That somebody outside of me actually noticed it made me feel like something objective happened and not just something in my head. Well, that's the end of today's full-blown episode. Sweet dreams.